it's really good to see so many kind of feminist publications and websites and whatever popping up online talking about things in ways that are really accessible. So stuff like Rookie, and there's Ramona, which is like an Australian one. Because I mean, when I was growing up, the only magazines that people read were like Dolly and Girlfriend and stuff, which didn't have any of that kind of stuff in it. So I think it's really great to see that those things are kind of starting to crop up and talking about feminist issues in a way that's really easy for younger women to understand. And then hopefully those young women will feel empowered to start talking about it themselves. And then I feel like it's a whole kind of chain reaction. So I started writing in an online journal when I was about 14 or 15. And it was pretty much just like my day-to-day life. But the difference when I started writing online is that you have people who are responding to the stuff that you say. I think I got kind of really addicted to the feeling of putting something out in the world and getting instant feedback. And so I went to uni and I studied journalism, but I wasn't really doing any journalism stuff for a long time. But I always have enjoyed using social media as a way to share the things that I'm interested in and opinions that I might have, and kind of start a big conversation with people that I know and also strangers. I only came around to feminism because of the social media and the internet, basically. There's just so many different avenues that create really good communities where you can meet people who are similar to you, and they can talk about these issues in ways that make more sense to you. So the way that I actually came around to feminism was through a fashion community. It was on LiveJournal. And they pretty much just posted photos of their outfits that they were wearing and said where each bit was from. And there was like an off-topic, offshoot community from that where people just talked about anything. And that's where I started learning these concepts like victim blaming and slut shaming and all that kind of stuff, which is such an unlikely place to come across that. But these were young women the same age as me who were talking about these things in language that I understood and in a context that I understood. So if it weren't for the internet, I don't know if that would have ever happened for me, just because everything that I came across about feminism in my real life up until then had been so dry and academic and inaccessible. But I think what's really important to remember as well is that it is a privilege to have access to the internet, and a lot of people don't. We're very lucky to live in a country where most people have access to the internet. But what I think about quite often with my writing is that a lot of the people that I would really like to reach are women who live in countries where they don't have access to the internet, and women who might not even be able to read English and stuff like that. So I think that's something that people really need to keep in mind when they think about feminism and how we're kind of spreading this message that it's not as easy as just like, oh, just put your voice out there online, because we're lucky that we can see that stuff, but some people never will. If you're writing about feminism or if you're quite vocal about social justice issues, there are people whose pretty much their whole life goal is to just get on the internet and make other people feel bad about themselves or send rape threats or whatever. And I mean, the first time that I got a rape threat on the internet, I was horrified and I was really upset. But now when I get them, I'm just like, well, block. And it's kind of messed up that you can even get used to something like that. But I think that even before the internet, people have always tried to shoot down powerful women. So if it wasn't the internet, it would be something else. I think that it's taught me to have a lot thicker skin than I used to. I just don't want to be silenced for saying the things that I believe in, and there are people who will try to push you down and shut you up, but it's not going to happen. So there was a time a couple of years ago when there was a big kind of media storm around a comedian who had made a rape joke. And I had tweeted at the time saying like, oh, you should boycott this guy's show because he's a piece of shit or whatever. And then all these comedy people were like, oh my God, feminists ruining everything. It's just a joke, blah, 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 whatever. So I kind of forgot about it. But then maybe a year later, I got a tweet from someone saying like, oh, if you don't understand comedy, you shouldn't go to the shows. And I was like, what are you even talking about? And they said, go look at news.com.au. So I did. And there was an article about this comedian guy who had a new show. And the show was basically him being like, oh, this show is all about my experience with like being harassed by feminists. And they had embedded a bunch of tweets in the article which they said were abusive. And one of them was mine, which wasn't even abusive. But then I got a tweet from some random person being like, I hope you get raped with a rusty knife or something. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, do people not understand like the irony of this whole thing? Like, I said something and then you replied to that by saying that you wanted to rape me, and you can't see how that's an issue. And then I ended up writing an article about that experience just because I thought it was such a perfect depiction of what women go through on the internet pretty much every single day. And platforms like Twitter and Facebook and stuff, they really don't do anything to stop that stuff. Like on Facebook, if you report things that have violence against women, usually they're just like, this doesn't violate our guidelines. Sorry. But then they'll take down a picture of someone breastfeeding or something. And on Twitter, it's so easy for people to just make new accounts. And so there's no accountability from the platforms as well, which really doesn't help. I don't generally tend to respond just because it really kind of fuels the fire and I can't be bothered and it makes me quite stressed. Usually I just ignore. And sometimes other people jump in for me, which is nice. I know that there are people who do engage quite heavily with that stuff, but I just find it quite emotionally exhausting. And like, because I'm quite an anxious person by nature, I would rather just avoid having to deal with those kinds of feelings. I was gonna say, if you're afraid of speaking up online, just do it, but it's not that easy for everyone. Like, there's people who can't because of their family or because of work or whatever their situation might be. If you have strong beliefs, like, stand by them. If you can't voice them for whatever reason, that doesn't make you less of a feminist. But if you can, and if you've got like a good group of friends backing you up or whatever, then it's worthwhile speaking up or finding avenues through which you can do that. I think it's important to know that it doesn't make you less of a feminist just because for whatever reason you can't speak up about issues online. Oh, I feel like I've just been like this rowdy person since I was a child, so it doesn't bother me if I have to shout people down. And I'm lucky that I have a pretty good network of friends and people who will back me up if I need them to. So I think some people don't believe that their singular voice can make an impact, but it can, even just on an individual level. Like, you don't have to be screaming it from the rooftops or whatever, but the conversations that we have with our peers and our family members and stuff, like, I think those really make a difference.